Alright, Year 11, first of all, really sorry that this is coming up quite late, this video. I've been promising this for about a week, or over a week, and I'm just getting around to filming it now, so apologies for that. This is the first video that I've made yet on the Middle East course. I'm going to hopefully get some more out over the next week or two in preparation for your GCSEs. Middle East is obviously a massive topic that we've been looking at since Christmas time. The area that most of you seem to get confused about or mix things up is the different wars that we've looked at. Obviously there are several different wars and conflicts that we look at in the course. So I thought that my first few Middle East videos I should focus on the wars really, because that's, as I say, the area where people tend to be having a lot of trouble or confusion, etc. So I'll just get right into it. First of all, I'm going to make a video now on the first Arab-Israeli war, which is obviously the war from 1948 to 49. It's sometimes called the 1948-49 war, but the first Arab-Israeli war, I'm going to do them in chronological order, so this is the first one that we look at. So, as I've said before in lessons, and I've said before several times, when we're looking at a conflict or a war, the first thing to look at, is the causes. You can generally break conflicts and wars down into three separate areas: causes, events, and consequences. So we're going to, you can do that with any event really, but particularly with a war or a conflict. So we're going to look at the causes first of all. So going way back to 1947, in February 1947, it was when Britain announced that they basically had enough of looking after the area of Palestine. Remember, they'd had the mandate of Palestine since the end of the First World War. There'd been a heck of a lot of trouble looking after the area. You know, they had to send the army there to deal with a lot of the uprisings from both the Arab side and the Jewish side. There's been a hell of a lot of trouble, and in February 1947 the British say, right, we're handing over control of Palestine to the UN. Because the UN should deal with this. The UN should work out what's going to happen to Palestine, because at the minute it's just not working. There's too much trouble. So Britain hand over authority over Palestine to the United Nations, the UN, and the UN get together and come up with, in November 1947, or approve, I should say, in 1947, the UN Partition Plan. Okay, which again we've looked at in lessons in quite a bit of detail. So the commission had been set up in 1947, around May 1947. The UN had this commission where they discussed what we're going to do with Palestine. Eventually it was agreed, right, we're going to partition it, we're going to split it up, we're going to give a bit of it to the Arab groups and a bit of it to the Jewish groups, so we'll try and keep both sides happy. And as I said before, in November 1947 is when the UN Partition Plan is announced. Just get a bit of paper. But why did the UN Partition Plan cause tension? Because on the face of it, from a very basic point of view, you go, oh, well, you know, both sides are being kept happy, they're both being given something. Well, in Palestine, as we've seen, the Jews at this time, in 1947, made up 33% of the population. But the UN Partition Plan gave them 55% of the land. Okay, so naturally, from an Arab view, from an Arab standpoint, you're looking at that going, well, hang on, 33% of the population have been given 55% of the land. Do the maths, doesn't add up. It's unfair, because there's more of us and we're being given less land. There's less of them, they're being given more land, so it's totally unfair. So the Jews accept the plan. They're not 100% happy with it. There are other issues that they're not too keen on, but the Jews are certainly the happier of the two parties. So they accept the plan. But unsurprisingly, the Arabs don't. They completely reject the plan because, as we've said before, or as I've said before, they think it's completely unfair. Now, what happens next is basically the region falls into civil war. Okay, the Arabs and the Jews are fighting each other, and during this period, actually, we have what is referred to as Plan D. Okay, which is the attempt, or an attempt, by the Jews to take control of the land that they've been promised. So they haven't been given this land yet as part of the partition plan. Obviously they've got to wait for the UN to kind of pull out and organise it all. But the Jews go, well, why should we wait? We should go and take this land now. This land's been promised to us. Let's go and settle in it now, get rid of the Arabs who are in there, so that when we're given the state of Israel, when we're given control of Israel or our new country, then there won't be any issues with getting rid of people we don't want. We can just be settled there already. So that's what Plan D is, to basically move into these areas, these Arab populated areas, and force out, sometimes quite violently, the Arab population that live there. Okay, and this naturally causes more and more tension between the two groups, between the Jews and the Arabs. So, on the 14th of May 1948, that's the last day of the British mandate. So it's the day that Britain fully withdraw from Palestine. Okay, the day where they completely move out of Palestine and go, right, we're handing over control of, the Arab bit to the Arabs and the Jewish bit to the Jews. And it's on this day, on the 14th of May 1948, that David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the state of Israel now existed. Israel is now an official country. Fantastic news for us, okay, for us Israelis. On the 15th of May, Israel was invaded, and it was invaded by, 7 countries in all. It was invaded by Egypt, by Iraq, by Transjordan, by Syria, by Lebanon, by Saudi Arabia, and by Yemen. Okay, troops from all of those 7 countries. Because, as I've said before, the Arab nations completely reject this, completely reject the state of Israel, completely reject the UN partition plan, and they invade. And this war, it lasts for 9 months. This first Arab-Israeli war lasts for 9 months, and at first it looks as if Israel are going to be defeated, going to be destroyed, because here's this brand new country. It's a day old. It's been invaded by 7 quite powerful countries, quite powerful nations, from all different angles, from the north, the south, and the east. Obviously, to the west is the sea there, so they can't get invaded from there. But Israel's been invaded from all around. Looks like they're going to be completely and utterly destroyed. And at first, they are getting battered, for want of a better phrase. But fortunately for them, the UN managed to negotiate a month-long truce in June. So the fighting's been going on for 3 or 4 weeks, and in June the UN are able to negotiate a truce where neither side are going to do any fighting. And this gave Israel a huge opportunity. During this truce, they reorganised themselves and they imported weaponry from Czechoslovakia, so that when the fighting started again, they were suddenly rearmed and reorganised and ready for a fight. And from then on, Israel are actually the ones who are having all the victories. They pushed the Arab nations out of Israel. They managed to take a huge chunk of land, as well, as we've seen in our lessons. And again, there'll be maps in your textbook and your exercise book, so you can have a look at those. But they gain huge chunks of land. So it's a victory for Israel. It's an undoubted victory for Israel, this 1948-49 First Arab-Israeli War. And for me, there are 5 main reasons why Israel are able to win. I'll go through them now. The first one is that the Arabs were actually overconfident. They don't send their full armies, they only send smaller chunks of their armies in, because they're so confident they're going to win. You can kind of see why, because obviously there's 7 of them, and one tiny country of Israel that's a day old, so they're naturally thinking, we're going to walk this, it's going to be easy. So they're overconfident, and that overconfidence, as we've seen, kind of blows back up in their face eventually. So that's one reason why Israel are able to win. Another reason is that many Israelis were more experienced fighters. Quite a few of them had served with Britain in the Second World War, so many members of the Israeli army, the new Israeli army, are experienced fighters, and that's not so much the case on the Arab side. Most of the Arab armies are quite inexperienced in warfare. Third reason is that Israel, I've said this one before, Israel had used that truce effectively. Obviously they'd imported weaponry from Czechoslovakia and they'd reorganised, which kind of leads on to the fourth one. That Israel were organised, particularly once they've had that month-long truce. They have a centralised command. They've got one man in charge, David Ben-Gurion, who can kind of give out orders from the top down to his regional commanders. Whereas the Arab nations, because they're from all different corners and several different countries, they have trouble agreeing on an overall plan. They tend to do their own thing, and because of that, there's not as much organisation going on. Okay, whereas, as I've said before, the Israeli army are centralised. They've got one command, and it's much more easy for them to organise themselves and have one key objective that they share. Finally, fifth reason Israeli determination. We've looked at this in lessons before. This war is known by Israelis as the War of Independence. Yeah, this is their war where they get their independence, they get their country. Okay, they've fought long and hard, both politically and in some cases physically, for this country. They've wanted it. It's their promised land. Again, we've discussed that in lessons. Israel is their promised land. They're not going to give this up without a fight to the death. It's so important that they win this war, and that determination will really have helped them win. Okay, I'm not saying that the Arabs weren't determined, but the Israelis are more determined than the Arabs in the long run, and that helps them win this war as well. So that's the events. The consequences of the war. What are the consequences of the war? Well, first of all, and quite importantly, the Arab states are humiliated by this. Obviously, they've gone into this war expecting for it to be a complete walkover, and it's been quite a humiliating, embarrassing defeat for them. It leads to a change in leadership in many countries like Egypt and Syria. Their leaders are overthrown. In fact, in terms of Egypt, I'll come back to that in the next video. Next video will be on the Suez Crisis, and obviously that's quite important, the change of leadership in Egypt. So it's a huge amount of embarrassment, and as a result of this embarrassment or this humiliation, there's a real desire in these Arab nations for revenge, and what's more, this idea of destroying Israel grows. This idea that we shouldn't just get revenge on them, we should completely destroy Israel as a country. Israel has no right to exist. We need to completely destroy it, and as we know, that becomes kind of the mantra of the PLO in the 1960s. It also drew It also drew the Arab countries closer to the USSR, because it was in the first Arab-Israeli war that Israel really cozied up to the USA. So this is where we first start to see this real split between Israel and the USA and the Arabs and the USSR, which, as we've seen over the course of the topic, becomes quite a contentious issue. Another consequence is the refugee crisis. So Israel, as I've said before, have taken over large areas of land, and in fact I have got a map here. I talked about you've got this map in your exercise book and your textbook. I've got it here as well. Okay, so here we have a map, okay, that on the face of it looks quite confusing, but it's quite straightforward. Here in the yellow is the land that Israel were given as part of the UN partition plan. In the kind of peachy colour, that's the land that was given to the Arabs, the Arab territory under the UN partition plan. Now this solid line here shows what counted as Israel after the war. So you can see Israel have taken all of this land here. They've taken big chunks here, and remember they took they took East Jerusalem, so half of Jerusalem they've gained control of. They've taken areas here, which just leaves the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So Israel take control of all this land, and in these areas of land that they've taken control of, the bits that were formerly Arab, that forced Arabs in these areas to flee. In fact, around 750,000 Arabs either left of their own accord or were forced to leave these areas. So it leads to a huge refugee crisis. 750,000, possibly more, people have to move to other countries, Egypt, Lebanon, etc., and live in refugee camps. And it's a huge crisis. And these refugee camps are a huge problem for, well, obviously the people living in them, because they don't want to be there. They want to, have a home of their own. But also it's a problem for Israel in that these refugee camps become basically training grounds for the Fedayeen, okay, the Arab freedom fighters. Obviously the Israelis see them as Arab terrorists, the Arabs see themselves as freedom fighters, but regardless of standpoint, these refugee camps become, as I've said before, training grounds basically for the Fedayeen, okay. So there's some of the key consequences of this war. So it's a very important war, and one that you definitely need to know about for your exam. So that's the first conflict that we've looked at, first Arab-Israeli war. As I've said before, the next video that I'm going to make at some point this week will be on the Suez Crisis, which is obviously the next key important conflict that we need to look at. Hopefully that 15-minute video has cleared up a few issues that you guys were having. Obviously, if you do get stuck, tweet or email or comment below in the YouTube video. You know where I am if you need help. You've got your textbooks, you've got your exercise books. Keep revising. As I said before, the next video will be on the Suez Crisis. Again, if you have any requests about any videos for the Middle East or any other topic, World War I, Germany or civil rights, again, tweet, email or leave a comment below. But as I said before, I hope that's cleared up a few issues, and I'll see you very soon.